My name is Aurora Vance, and for 28 years I have painted a masterpiece of lies. Not on canvas, not with oils or charcoal, but with my very life. A life my parents, Richard and Evelyn Vance, meticulously crafted to serve their grand design, a life that never truly belonged to me. And now, as I stand at the brink of everything they built for me and everything they denied me, rebellious brushstrokes are beginning to take shape. Even now, as I stand here, a resident doctor at New York Presbyterian Hospital, the sharp sting of disinfectant clings to my scrubs. I can still feel the faint ache in my fingertips, a yearning for turpentine and linseed oil that once defined my world. My reflection in the sterile glass door of the ward shows a woman by all accounts successful, intelligent, conventionally attractive, with the sharp, analytical eyes of someone trained to solve complex problems. But look closer, beyond the rehearsed smile for patients, past the efficient gestures for colleagues, and you will see it a weariness far too old for 28 years, and a sorrow so deep that no medical term or successful diagnosis could ever cure it. My parents, Richard and Evelyn, would call this a fulfilled life. From their sprawling colonial estate in Chestnut Hill, Boston, they would tell friends over artisanal cheeses and vintage Cabernet, "Our Aurora, she's a doctor." A true success story. They would beam, basking in the reflected glow of my achievements, utterly oblivious, or perhaps willfully blind to the cavernous void inside me. Their world, built upon carefully arranged appearances and fragile social veneers, demanded perfection, and I was their most polished exhibit. But I was not always the sterile white coat. Before the stethoscopes and late-night calls, there was another Aurora. An Aurora with paint-stained fingers and graphite smudges across her cheeks, a girl whose world was a chaos of color and raw emotion. My earliest memories are not of lullabies or fairy tales, but of light slanting through an attic window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air, turning the ordinary into a spectacle begging to be interpreted. I remember the thrill of my first watercolor set, how pigments bled and merged, creating something wholly new from simple droplets of color. I saw the world in gradients, in textures, in the quiet stories whispered by shadow and light. My childhood sketchbooks were not filled with stick figures, but with startlingly detailed portraits of our housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, her worried wrinkles etched deep, or the ancient oak tree in our backyard, its gnarled branches like arthritic fingers clawing at the bruised sky. My art was not a hobby. It was how I understood the world, how I spoke when words failed. It was simply my soul laid bare. At first, my parents indulged me. "Oh, how sweet our little painter," my mother Evelyn would coo, holding up a drawing of the family dog with a well-practiced smile of admiration. My father Richard, ever the pragmatist, would give a curt, "Good job, Aurora," shows attention to detail. They even enrolled me in weekend art classes, a fleeting, fragile encouragement I clung to with desperate hope. But that hope began to shatter once they realized this was not just a childhood phase. This was who I was. "Art is not a stable path, darling," my mother began, her voice laced with the feigned concern she used to gently steer me away from anything that didn't fit her preordained narrative. "You're too smart to waste your talents on something so uncertain. Doctors, lawyers, those are respected careers with futures." She would say it while stroking my hair, her touch a silken cage. "Look at Ethan, Aurora," my father would add, his voice steel wrapped in velvet. "The boy is fragile. He needs protecting. He needs someone strong, reliable, someone like you to be the foundation of this family. You, my daughter, are destined for greatness, for something of true value. You are our pride." Ethan. My twin brother Ethan Vance. 2 minutes younger, yet a lifetime apart. Where I was radiant and relentless, he was pale and subdued. Where I saw the world as a canvas, he saw it as an eternal stage for his delicate emotions. He was the fragile one, the artistic soul my parents felt compelled to shield, to nurture, and now I understand, to fabricate. They encouraged his art, supplying him with expensive easels, imported paints, and private tutors. "Ethan has such a unique vision," my mother would gush at their endless social gatherings, pointing to one of his formless abstract works that looked suspiciously like a child's finger painting. "He's our sensitive artist. A true gift." But it was a gift given at a hidden cost, a cost I paid. I excelled academically not merely because I was bright, but because it became my only outlet for relentless drive. Every A, every accolade was a desperate plea for recognition, a silent scream for validation that my artistic efforts never received. When acceptance letters from prestigious universities arrived, many with full scholarships, my parents beamed. "See, Aurora, we knew you had it in you. This is what real talent looks like." That was when the true manipulation began. "Tufts has an excellent pre-med program, Aurora. And Harvard Medical unmatched, my father declared one evening over perfectly roasted duck, not a question in his tone but a command. You've always been good at science. It's stable, respected, and you'll be able to help people. Think of the good you can do. My heart sank. I had secretly applied to RISD to Pratt to CalArts dream schools where the air vibrated with creation. I had even been accepted with partial scholarships. But I never dared tell them. ISC's Enschel. The weight of their expectations, the ceaseless whispers of family stability and taking care of Ethan had already begun to crush my spirit. But what about art? I ventured, my voice barely a whisper, my eyes fixed on the intricate pattern of the antique rug. My mother sighed, a theatrical exhalation that said everything. Aurora, darling, you can always paint as a hobby, but a career in medicine, that's a legacy. That's a safe future for all of us. Especially with Ethan pursuing his more experimental path. He needs someone strong to lean on. Then came the insidious part, the twist of the knife in my naive, loving heart. You know, your scholarship covers a significant portion, but there are still living expenses, books, the sheer costs of being in a city like Boston, my father explained, his brow furrowed with a convincing gravity. We don't have the liquid assets we once did, you understand. The market, some unfortunate investments, but we'll manage. And part of your student loans, the ones you won't need for tuition, well, they could really help cover some family expenses, even allow Ethan to pursue the costly art courses he needs. Think of it as an investment in all our futures. You're doing this for the family, Aurora. You're our savior. And I believed them. I truly, utterly believed them. I was the strong one, the capable one. It was my duty, my privilege to bear this burden. To sacrifice my dreams for the greater good of the family, to ensure my fragile twin Ethan could thrive. The thought of helping Ethan, of being the pillar he supposedly needed, resonated with a deep yearning to be loved, to be truly needed by my parents. So I swallowed my protests, packed away my sketchbooks into dusty boxes, and enrolled in pre-med, then medical school. The years that followed were a blur of caffeine textbooks and the relentless grind of medical training. While I navigated the cutthroat world of organic chemistry and human anatomy, pulling sleepless nights in dim libraries, Ethan attended exclusive art retreats in Santa Fe, received private lessons from renowned and exorbitantly expensive artists, and curated small, carefully staged exhibitions in quaint galleries my parents proudly publicly funded. Ethan is really blossoming, my mother gushed during our obligatory Sunday calls, her voice practically trembling with excitement. His latest series, Echoes of the Sublime, is profound. You must see it when you're home next. Home. A word that began to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a carefully constructed stage, where I was a supporting actress in the grand artistic drama of Ethan. When I managed to return to Boston during holidays, drained and emotionally hollow, I was greeted with a whirlwind of Ethan's newest triumphs. His new studio space, glowing yet suspiciously vague reviews of his work, potential investors my father claimed to have secured. Meanwhile, my own accomplishments, consistently ranking at the top of my class, securing coveted research positions, even presenting at national medical conferences, were met with a dismissive, "That's wonderful, Aurora. We always knew you'd do well." Now about Ethan's upcoming exhibition. The conversation inevitably circled back to him, leaving me feeling like an afterthought, a functional cog in their well-oiled machine, but never truly seen, never truly celebrated for myself. My life became a suffocating duality. By day, I was Dr. Vance, sharp, empathetic, making life-or-death decisions, shouldering immense responsibility. I thrived on the intellectual challenge, the tangible impact of healing. But by night, returning to my small, meticulously tidy apartment on the Upper East Side, worlds away from the sprawling brownstones of my more privileged colleagues, I retreated into my secret world. Hidden behind a false bookshelf in my living room was my secret studio. The air there hung heavy with oil, paint, and regret. I would uncap the turpentine, pull out my old brushes, and stand before a blank canvas, but the joy, the fierce, unbridled inspiration of my youth had been replaced by a gnawing emptiness. My hands, once eager to create, now trembled with a silent rage. The paintings I produced in those stolen hours were dark, anguished. Swirling storm clouds, fractured figures, desolate, unforgiving landscapes. They were raw, visceral exorcisms of pain, of betrayal, of the crushing weight of a life not chosen. I tried to suppress it, to deny the artist still clawing at the edges of my soul. "You're a doctor, Aurora," I would whisper to my reflection, my voice hoarse with exhaustion. "You chose this. You sacrificed this for your family. Don't be selfish." but the resentment simmered a smoldering flame beneath the carefully constructed calm. I watched Ethan seemingly free to chase his passion, though I secretly found his work mediocre and a bitter envy twisted inside me. Then guilt would follow. He was fragile. He needed me. I was the strong one. The cycle was relentless, eroding my sense of self, leaving me hollow and utterly alone. My parents' calls became a predictable ritual. Always about Ethan. His latest breakthrough, his struggles with artistic block, his social life, his emotional well-being. Never about me. Once, when I tried to share the crushing weight of residency, the ethical dilemmas, the exhaustion that seeped into my bones, my mother waved it off with a dismissive gesture. "Oh, Aurora, all doctors work hard. You're strong. You'll manage." Now, Ethan is having a little crisis with his new gallery space. And just like that, my struggles were diminished, relegated to insignificance compared to the latest melodrama of their precious artist. The emotional foundation of my life was a crumbling structure built on lies and unacknowledged sacrifices. I was praised for my strength, but only because my strength was a convenient tool for their manipulation. I was lauded for my independence, but only because my independence meant I would not be a burden. I was loved, perhaps, but it felt like a conditional love reserved for the version of Aurora that served their purposes. But even the most meticulously constructed facades eventually crack under pressure. And the pressure within me is reaching its breaking point. Every stitch I sew, every diagnosis I deliver, every life I try to salvage feels like a betrayal of the life I was meant to live, the artist I was meant to become. The simmering anger inside me is no longer a smolder, it is a slow, unstoppable boil threatening to erupt and shatter the carefully arranged masterpiece of my life, and perhaps of theirs as well. The injustice of it all, the brazen audacity of their manipulation is a bitter pill I have swallowed for far too long. And a thought terrifying in its size has begun to form in the darkest recesses of my mind. If they built their world upon my sacrifice, what happens if I decide to reclaim it piece by painful piece? The canvas is blank once more, but this time I will hold the brush and the colors will be mine. The first stroke will be justice. The rest a symphony of retribution and perhaps rebirth. This is the stillness before the storm, the tension of a spring before release. My parents in their Boston mansion remain blissfully unaware. They see their accomplished daughter, the doctor, their pride. They see their fragile son, the artist, their project. They see the perfect family portrait. But they do not see the volcano simmering beneath my calm exterior. They do not see the paintings in my secret room screaming the truth. And they certainly do not see the storm coming for them. Not yet. The sterile hum of the hospital's ICU still echoed in my ears, but now it was a hollow sound devoid of purpose. My hands, which just hours ago had competently navigated delicate procedures, felt clammy and alien as I stared at the formal letter clutched between them. Temporary suspension pending investigation. The words blurred, then sharpened, each one a hammer blow to the carefully constructed facade of my life. A medical error. Not fatal, thankfully, the patient was stable, but a clear, undeniable lapse in judgment. A fatigue-induced mistake that under normal circumstances a doctor of my caliber would never make. But these weren't normal circumstances. My nights were a torment of repressed artistic urges, my days a blur of forced medical precision. The cracks had finally shown. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My career, the very foundation my parents had demanded I build, was crumbling. This was my worst nightmare, yet a strange, almost perverse part of me felt a flicker of something else, a fleeting sense of release, as if the suffocating weight of expectation might finally give way. This was it, the moment I would need them. The moment they would surely finally see my vulnerability, my humanity, and offer the unconditional support I had craved my entire life. I dialed their number, my finger hovering over the contact, a tremor running through me. It was late, but I knew they would be awake. My parents kept hours as meticulously curated as their social calendar. My mother, Evelyn, answered on the second ring, her voice crisp, slightly annoyed at the unannounced interruption. "Aurora, darling, is everything quite all right? You rarely call this late." "Mom," I began, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I've been suspended. There was an incident. A mistake." The words tumbled out raw and unpolished, a stark contrast to the perfectly articulated reports I usually delivered. I explained the situation, the exhaustion, the self-recrimination, my fear for my future. I laid bare my professional soul, hoping for comfort, for empathy, for the motherly embrace I had never truly known. There was a beat of silence on the line, long and heavy, pregnant, not with concern but with something colder. Then my father Richard took the phone, his voice sharp, instantly cutting through my fragile confession. Suspended Aurora. What on earth were you thinking? Do you have any idea what this could do to our family's reputation? To your brother's image? Just when Ethan is finally starting to make some headway with his new collection, the words hit me like a physical blow, each one a shard of ice piercing my already wounded spirit. Not "are you okay?" Not "we're here for you." Not even "how can we help?" But what about our reputation? What about Ethan? The familiar pattern etched deep into the fabric of my being asserted itself once more. My pain, my crisis was merely an inconvenience, a potential blemish on the pristine facade of the Vance family, a threat to their carefully constructed narrative. A memory flashed sharp and unwelcome of my high school graduation. Valedictorian. I had delivered a speech that brought most of the audience to tears, a heartfelt reflection on ambition and the pursuit of dreams. My parents, sitting in the front row, had offered a practiced smile, a polite nod. As soon as the ceremony ended, the congratulatory handshakes, the obligatory photos, my mother had immediately turned to my father, saying, "Richard, did you see the dean's expression during Ethan's art show last week? I think he was genuinely impressed. This could be a real boost for him." My achievement, a culmination of years of relentless effort, had been merely a stepping stone, a backdrop for Ethan's potential. It was always about Ethan. Always. "I don't know what I'm going to do," I confessed into the phone, my voice now devoid of tears, replaced by a hollow ache. "They're talking about a formal hearing, possibly revoking my license. I need legal counsel, and I'm completely drained mentally and financially." I had expected them to offer resources, connections, anything. After all, they had insisted on this path for me, this stable, prestigious career. My mother's voice, now back on the line, was tinged with irritation, a familiar grating sound. "Aurora, darling, we're on a fixed income now, you know. With Ethan's new studio space and the costs associated with his upcoming European exhibition, well, we're stretched rather thin. You're a brilliant doctor, you'll figure it out. You always do. You've always been so independent." Independent. The word, once a badge of honor they'd bestowed upon me, now felt like a curse. It meant self-sufficient, "Don't bother us, we won't lift a finger." A deep, bitter laugh escaped me, sounding more like a gasp. "Fixed income, Mom, you own half of Beacon Hill. And you've been funding Ethan's European exhibition for years." My father's voice cut in, cold and authoritative. "Aurora, this is not the time for histrionics. You made your bed, now lie in it. Focus on fixing your own problems. We have enough to contend with Ethan's delicate constitution. We will not be bailing you out of a situation of your own making." The click of the phone disconnecting was final, absolute. They had hung up on me. My own parents, in my darkest hour, had chosen their fragile reputation and Ethan's fabricated artistic dreams over their daughter's crumbling life. I slumped onto my sofa, the pristine white walls of my apartment closing in. The anger, initially a dull throb, began to pulsate hot and fierce through my veins. Fixed income. The lie was so brazen, so utterly contemptuous of my intelligence. Memories once relegated to the dusty corners of my mind began to surge forward unbidden, forming a mosaic of betrayal. I remembered applying to college. I'd earned a full academic scholarship to Harvard, a fact my parents loudly trumpeted. But there were still living expenses, books, and the constant subtle pressure from my parents to contribute to family overhead. "You're so resourceful, Aurora," my mother would say. "You'll find ways to manage." And I did. I worked 3 jobs throughout college, tutoring, waiting tables, even selling small anonymous sketches online, all while maintaining a perfect GPA. I sent money home, believing it was going into a collective family pot, easing their supposed financial strain. Ethan's classes. Another memory. He was supposed to be at RISD, but his sensitive artistic temperament couldn't handle the pressure. So my parents arranged for private tutors, exclusive workshops. All expenses paid, of course. I had once seen a bill for one such workshop, an abstract sculpture retreat in the Hamptons, costing more than my entire semester's worth of textbooks and rent combined. At the time, I dismissed it, thinking, well, he needs it. He's fragile. Now a sickening realization began to dawn. Was that money, my money? Was it my scholarship, my loan money, my hard-earned tips that was fueling Ethan's expensive, talentless pursuits? My apartment, usually a sanctuary from the chaos of the hospital, now felt like a gilded cage. I paced, my mind racing, piecing together fragments. The exorbitant allowance Ethan received even through his late 20s. The seed money for his various failed ventures. A pop-up gallery that lasted 3 months, an artisanal coffee shop with an art corner that folded in 6. Each time my parents had brushed it off as part of the artistic journey learning experiences while simultaneously praising my pragmatism and financial acumen for choosing a stable career. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. They had cultivated my pragmatism, my independence, my supposed financial acumen only to exploit it. They had forced me into a life I hadn't chosen, then used the fruits of my labor to prop up the fantasy they had created for my brother. And all the while I had believed I was doing my duty, being the strong one, the savior. I walked into my hidden studio, the sanctuary within the cage. The air, usually a comfort, now felt heavy, suffocating. My unfinished canvases stared back at me, mocking me with their vibrant potential. One in particular, a storm-tossed seascape, felt like a premonition. Wild, churning waves, a tiny struggling boat, and a distant, indifferent lighthouse. It was me, always fighting the storm alone. I picked up an old, forgotten sketchpad from beneath a pile of canvases. It was from my college days, filled with frantic, emotional sketches. And then at the very back, I found it. Not a drawing, but a crumpled, faded bank statement. It was a statement from an old savings account, one my parents had set up for me when I was a child, supposedly for my future artistic endeavors. I remembered them telling me they'd put a small inheritance from a distant relative into it. I'd always assumed it was still there, untouched. But the statement showed a different story. Years of meticulous withdrawals, large sums frequently, always signed off with parental discretionary fund or family support. The dates corresponded eerily with Ethan's breakthrough artistic periods. His first solo show, his first expensive private lesson, the down payment on his first laughably bad studio space in Williamsburg. My inheritance. My small, precious nest egg for my own dreams. It had been systematically plundered. My breath hitched. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just favoritism. This was calculated theft. They hadn't just stifled my dreams. They had stolen the resources for them to fuel Ethan's. They hadn't just encouraged his artistic path. They had paid for every step, constructing an illusion of talent and success. And they had done it with my money. A memory resurfaced sharper than any knife. The year I was applying for medical school, I'd needed a significant loan for living expenses and application fees, even with my scholarships. My parents had been unusually evasive. My father had said something about tight times about reinvesting in Ethan's promising career. He had suggested I take out more student loans, emphasizing that a doctor's salary will easily cover it. He had even helped me find a private lender, subtly guiding me towards an institution with less favorable terms but quick approval. I'd been so desperate, so eager to prove myself, I hadn't questioned it. Now I questioned everything. The fixed income. The unfortunate investments. The delicate constitution of Ethan. All of it a meticulously crafted narrative to extract maximum benefit from me, their strong, independent, resourceful daughter. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach, replacing the burning anger with something far more chilling, a quiet, resolute fury. This wasn't about earning their love anymore. It was about justice. It was about dismantling the entire fraudulent structure they had built brick by painful brick. I thought about Ethan, my twin. We shared a womb, a birthday, a last name, but not a life. He was the golden child, forever protected, forever indulged. Was he a knowing participant in this charade, or merely another victim of their elaborate manipulation? The crumpled letter from the savings account statement provided a disturbing clue: parental discretionary fund. It implied they had full control, full authority. But Ethan had benefited directly. He had lived the life I was denied with the funds that should have been mine. Was his weakness a performance or a genuine consequence of never having to truly strive for anything? The line between victim and accomplice blurred in the suffocating fog of my family's deception. A new clarity settled over me, sharp and unforgiving. The medical error, the suspension, it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The forced pause in my life, the moment they had abandoned me, was actually the gift of time. Time to see, time to understand, time to plan. I walked back to my study, not to paint but to begin a different kind of meticulous work. I pulled out my laptop, my legal pads, my most organized folders. My doctor's mind, trained for diagnostic precision and the meticulous gathering of evidence, was now fully engaged. I needed to understand their financial situation, not just the flimsy excuses they fed me. I needed to find every thread of their deception, pull on it, and watch the entire tapestry unravel. The shame of my suspension, the sting of their rejection now fueled a cold, calculating determination. They wanted a strong, independent daughter. They would get one who would no longer be their pawn but their judge. My real life was not over. It was about to begin. And this time I would be the one holding the brush, painting a picture of truth no matter how ugly the colors. The first step was research. The first step was uncovering the full extent of their betrayal. The first step was to find all the hidden documents to meticulously cross-reference their lies with the undeniable proof of their greed. The journey to reclaim myself and to exact my own form of justice had officially begun. The quiet, repressed artist within me was finally waking up, and she was furious. The sterile quiet of my apartment, once a retreat, now felt like a vault sealing me in with my torment. The initial shock of my parents' betrayal had morphed into a slow, searing agony, a realization that the very foundation of my identity was built on a lie. I, Aurora Vance, the diligent doctor, the reliable daughter, was nothing more than a carefully crafted instrument in their grand deception. This pain was different from any I'd felt before. It was an existential wound, a fracturing of self. Every memory, every act of sacrifice, every moment of yearning for their love now tasted like ash. My medical suspension, once a personal disaster, now felt like the universe's cruel joke, forcing me into inactivity precisely when my world had imploded. I plunged into the meticulous task of uncovering their lies with the clinical precision of a surgeon. My laptop became my weapon, my mind a sharp scalpel dissecting years of financial statements, property records, and obscure art market dealings. It was a descent into a labyrinth of deceit, and with each discovery the pain intensified, but so did a cold, hard resolve. The first thread I pulled was the parental discretionary fund from my old savings account. Through a labyrinth of legal loopholes and outdated bank policies, my parents had systematically drained the small inheritance meant for my artistic future. I traced the outgoing transfers to shell accounts, then to the various artistic endeavors of Ethan Vance. Private lessons with a renowned sculptor in Santa Fe, an exclusive abstract painting workshop in the Hamptons, the exorbitant rent for his fleeting gallery in Williamsburg. All paid for with money that was rightfully mine. Each transaction was a fresh stab, but also a surge of clarity. My art had been stolen not just emotionally, but financially. Then came the student loans. My father, Richard, had helped me secure a private loan for my medical school living expenses, guiding me towards a particular institution. What I discovered was that the interest rates were significantly higher than market value and the terms unusually restrictive. But the true horror lay in the fine print. A portion of the loan, a substantial sum, was designated for family education support and directly accessible by a third party. My parents. They hadn't just encouraged me to take out loans. They had engineered it, siphoning off my borrowed future to fund their present illusion. The very debt that weighed on me, that constrained my choices, was their creation, a financial leash. The thought made me sick. I worked relentlessly, fueled by black coffee and a burning, unquenchable anger. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, haunted by images of my parents smiling, congratulating me on my independence, while systematically stripping me of it. I visualized them in their opulent Boston home, clinking glasses, basking in the reflected glory of my achievements, while simultaneously orchestrating my financial subjugation. The hypocrisy was a poison in my veins. My focus shifted to their own finances, the fixed income they so glibly cited. This required deeper digging, public records searches, and leveraging the few non-medical professional contacts I had discreetly cultivated. What I found was a carefully constructed house of cards. My father's once lucrative consulting firm had been in steady decline for years, riddled with bad investments and outdated practices. To maintain their lifestyle and, more importantly, their social standing, they had systematically leveraged their assets, taking out secondary mortgages on their Chestnut Hill estate, liquidating valuable family heirlooms, and even discreetly selling off a portion of my mother's inherited trust fund. The European exhibition for Ethan A. Sham. There were no legitimate galleries involved, only a series of paid pop-ups in obscure European cities arranged by a shady publicist my parents had hired. These were not opportunities. They were expensive photo opportunities carefully staged to create the illusion of a burgeoning international career for their fragile artist son. The costs were astronomical, far exceeding any meager sales Ethan's truly mediocre work could generate. And those costs, I now knew, had been increasingly subsidized by my student loan money, my inheritance. The suffering was immense. Each document I unearthed, each lie exposed, felt like a fresh cut, flaying away another layer of my naive, hopeful self. I wept silently in my apartment, the tears a hot torrent of grief for the girl who had believed in her family, for the dreams that had been cruelly snatched away. I pounded my fists against the sterile white walls, a silent scream of rage and despair. But then, amidst the agony, a strange thing began to happen. With each piece of undeniable evidence, a subtle shift occurred. The amorphous, overwhelming pain began to crystallize into something tangible, something I could act upon. The feeling of helplessness receded, replaced by a growing sense of power. The victim began to transform into the architect of a new reality. My first target, the private student loan. The terms were predatory, designed to keep me indebted. Armed with overwhelming evidence of their fraudulent misrepresentation and the fact that a significant portion of the loan was never even disbursed to me for my education, I built a case. It was audacious, bordering on aggressive. I knew the legal system from an academic perspective, but now I was applying that knowledge with a personal, vengeful fervor. I drafted a meticulously detailed letter to the loan provider outlining the deception, attaching every piece of financial documentation I had gathered, and threatening a class action lawsuit for predatory lending practices and complicity in financial fraud if they didn't restructure my loan. I included a clear demand: the portion of the loan diverted to my parents must be immediately forgiven and my interest rate drastically reduced. The response was swift and, to my immense satisfaction, entirely in my favor. The loan provider, facing the prospect of a public scandal and a costly lawsuit, agreed to a settlement. The portion of the loan funneled to my parents was erased, my interest rate dropped to an almost negligible level, and my repayment schedule was dramatically extended. The difference in my monthly payments was staggering, a sudden, unexpected lightness in my financial burden. As I read the confirmation email, a burst of something unfamiliar ignited within me. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was a potent mix of relief and a fierce, triumphant satisfaction. The pain of the past wasn't gone, but it was momentarily eclipsed by the intoxicating taste of retribution. One small victory. One debt paid not by me, but by those who had profited from my suffering. Next, I focused on Ethan's artistic funds. I anonymously compiled a dossier of evidence: bank statements, emails detailing parent-orchestrated sales testimonials from individuals paid to attend his exhibitions, even photographs of empty galleries where his sold-out shows were supposedly held. It was a damning indictment of a colossal artistic fraud. I sent this anonymous package to a prominent art critic known for his scathing takedowns of pretentious, untalented artists, along with a tip to an investigative journalist at a major New York newspaper. The accompanying note was short and precise: the Emperor's new art, the Vance family, Chestnut Hill, Boston. The wait was agonizing. Each day felt like an eternity, but I was learning patience, a cold, strategic patience. Then the first article dropped. It was a brutal exposé meticulously detailing Ethan Vance's meteoric rise as a carefully manufactured PR stunt, funded by mysterious benefactors and propped up by a network of paid sycophants. The critic's review of Ethan's work was merciless, calling it uninspired, derivative, and utterly devoid of genuine artistic merit. The ensuing media frenzy was a spectacle. Online social media exploded with ridicule. Ethan Vance, the sensitive artist, became a meme, the poster child for untalented nepotism. Art publications, initially fawning, quickly turned on him, retracting their previous praise. His European exhibition was unmasked as a series of rented rooms and staged photographs. The investors my father had so proudly spoken of quietly withdrew their non-existent support. When I saw the headlines, when I read the scathing reviews, a powerful wave of elation washed over me. It was a dangerous, exhilarating feeling. The suffering was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but the satisfaction of seeing their carefully constructed illusion shatter was profound. Ethan's art, which they had forced me to sacrifice my own for, was exposed as the hollow charade it always was. My heart, so long constricted, felt a savage sense of release. It was a taste of victory, and it was addictive. But the biggest target remained my parents' fixed income and their inflated social standing. I had traced the secondary mortgages on their Chestnut Hill estate, uncovering a disturbing truth. They were dangerously over-leveraged, relying on my continued success to maintain their payments and avoid foreclosure. My medical suspension had already dealt a blow, making them nervous. My next move would be the coup de grace. I discreetly reached out to a former colleague from my research days, a brilliant but ethically flexible forensic accountant. I presented him with a sanitized version of my findings, enough to pique his professional curiosity. I wanted to understand the most vulnerable points in their financial empire, how they could be legally, irrevocably brought down. His report was stark. They were teetering on the brink. One wrong move, one missed payment, and their entire facade would crumble. Their remaining liquid assets were tied up in a series of obscure high-risk investments that my father in his desperation had gambled on. Their reputation, their most prized possession, was the only thing holding the house of cards together. My heart pounded not with fear but with a cold, thrilling anticipation. I recalled a memory, a childhood moment of crushing disappointment. I was 12 and I had won a statewide art competition. My parents, however, were too busy celebrating Ethan's first Little League home run to attend the awards ceremony. I remembered standing on stage clutching my silver medal, scanning the audience for their faces, only to find them absent. I'd gone home the medal heavy in my hand to an empty house. They were still at Ethan's game, cheering loudly for a fleeting moment of athletic glory. That memory, so sharp and painful, now fueled my next move. They had built their world on my absence, on my sacrifice. Now I would ensure their world crumbled with my presence, with my orchestrated revelation. The pain was still deep, a reminder of all I had lost. But each successful strike, each crack in their armor brought with it a surge of satisfaction, a sense of reclaiming a piece of myself. The monster they had created, the independent, resourceful, calculating daughter, was now turning her formidable intellect against them. And it felt terrifyingly, wonderfully right. The air in my apartment crackled with a new kind of energy. The raw, gut-wrenching pain of betrayal hadn't vanished, but it was now transmuted into a cold, focused fury. My emotions, once a tumultuous sea, had become a finely tuned instrument, each surge of anger, a surge of clarity, each pang of sorrow, a sharpened edge to my resolve. My suspension had freed me paradoxically from the very constraints that had bound me. I was no longer the doctor, the daughter, the victim. I was Aurora Vance, strategist avenger, and for the first time in my life, truly in control of my own narrative. The forensic accountant's report lay spread across my desk, a map to their vulnerability. My parents' house of cards built on my coerced success, and Ethan's manufactured image was precariously balanced. The secondary mortgages, the dwindling trust fund, the ill-advised high-risk investments, it all pointed to one undeniable truth: they were financially overextended. Their opulent lifestyle, a facade maintained only by constant juggling and the implicit expectation of my continued high-earning support. My medical suspension had not only cut off their future source of funding, but had also sent ripples of panic through their fragile financial structure. My next move had to be precise, devastating, and entirely untraceable back to me. They had used my intelligence against me for years. Now I would use it to unravel them. I identified the most vulnerable point: my father's high-risk investments. He was pouring what little liquid capital they had into a series of speculative tech startups, recommended by a notoriously volatile hedge fund manager he vaguely knew from his old boys' club. This wasn't shrewd investment, it was desperate gambling. My plan began with a ghost. I spent days creating an anonymous online persona, a sophisticated, seemingly legitimate financial analyst with an impeccable but fabricated track record. I curated an online presence complete with a professional-looking profile photo sourced from stock images and a feed filled with insightful but generic market analyses. This persona, which I named Vanguard Analyst, quickly established a small, credible following in niche financial forums. Then, through a series of carefully orchestrated posts and direct messages, I began to subtly sow seeds of doubt about the very tech startups my father was invested in. I didn't make outright accusations. Instead, I highlighted legitimate but exaggerated concerns: market saturation, unproven business models, questionable leadership. I used real data, twisted and presented in a way that painted a picture of impending doom. My tone was always analytical, objective, and deeply convincing. I knew my father's pride. He was always trying to prove he was still a mover and shaker, still connected. He wouldn't openly admit to being influenced by an anonymous online analyst. But I also knew his insecurity. He would secretly follow discussions seeking validation, or in this case, confirmation of his worst fears. My posts would gnaw at him, planting an insidious seed of panic. Simultaneously, I leveraged the medical world I had temporarily stepped away from. I had access to a vast network of physicians, many of whom were wealthy and active investors. Through my real professional persona, I began casually mentioning in hushed tones, as if sharing a confidential tip, a growing concern about a certain volatile sector of the tech market. I spoke of unstable startups and impending corrections. These were subtle whispers, enough to trigger the inherent caution of the medical community, a community known for its conservative investment strategies. My colleagues, trusting my analytical mind, started pulling back from similar investments, creating a ripple effect. The effect was exactly as I predicted. My father, seeing a sudden downturn in the valuations of his chosen startups fueled by the online Vanguard analyst and the whispers from his social circle, panicked. He was a man who couldn't stand to lose face, couldn't admit a mistake. He didn't just cut his losses, he pulled out entirely at a significant disadvantage, convinced he was narrowly escaping a catastrophe. The impact was immediate and substantial. The small remaining portion of liquid assets they had was severely depleted. A cold, exhilarating satisfaction washed over me as I watched the news of the market fluctuations. The financial pain I'd caused them was tangible, concrete. It was a mirror of the pain they had inflicted upon me, not just emotionally but financially. The knowledge that they were now facing real financial consequences, not just my personal struggles, was a potent balm to my wounded soul. The heavy weight on my chest, the constant ache lessened slightly, but this was only the beginning. My true target was their reputation, the carefully cultivated image that was their most prized possession. The exposé on Ethan's art fraud had already done significant damage, making them the subject of hushed whispers and thinly veiled pity among their social set. Now I would turn those whispers into a roaring public humiliation. My forensic accountant, the brilliant but morally ambiguous one, had also uncovered something else, a series of questionable land deals from my father's past, involving a conservation trust that my parents had actively promoted in Boston. On the surface, they were champions of environmental protection. Beneath, there were hints of insider trading of land being bought cheaply before zoning changes and then resold for massive profits, all cleverly disguised through offshore companies. It wasn't outright illegal, but it was deeply unethical, bordering on fraud, and certainly a betrayal of the public trust they had so loudly proclaimed. I knew the perfect target for this information, a tenacious investigative journalist at the Boston Globe, a woman renowned for her exposés on local corruption and hypocrisy. I compiled a meticulously organized package of documents, cross-referenced with public records, highlighting the connections and the suspicious timing. This wasn't just a collection of facts. It was a compelling story of betrayal of the elite, exploiting the very causes they claimed to champion. Again, I sent it anonymously, a carefully crafted email from a burner account, making sure to include enough tantalizing details to guarantee the journalist's attention. The subject line, "The Philanthropic Mr. Vance and His Boston Land Deals." The weight was unbearable. Every day I scoured the Boston Globe online, my heart hammering with a mixture of dread and anticipation. I imagined my parents oblivious in their Chestnut Hill mansion, still clinging to their pretense of integrity, while the sword of Damocles I had fashioned hung over their heads. The image brought a dark, vengeful pleasure. Then one Tuesday morning it happened. The headline blared across the front page of the Boston Globe's online edition: "The Philanthropic Facade Questions Arise Over Richard Vance's Past Land Dealings." The article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, laying bare the intricate web of my father's unethical actions. It detailed how he had allegedly used his influence within the Conservation Trust to acquire prime development land at bargain prices, only to flip it for enormous profits after rezoning, all while publicly advocating for its preservation. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Calls for his resignation from various boards and committees flooded in. His name, once synonymous with old Boston money and integrity, was now dragged through the mud of public scrutiny. Social media, still buzzing from the Ethan Vance art scandal, erupted anew, painting my father as a hypocrite and a crook. The very social circles my parents had so desperately tried to impress now shunned them. Invitations dried up. Phone calls went unanswered. Their carefully constructed world of status and reputation began to crumble around them, not with a bang but with the deafening silence of social ostracization. I sat in my apartment watching the news reports, reading the comments online, a chill spreading through me. The pain of my own betrayal, the decades of emotional neglect, was still a dull throb, but now it was overshadowed by a fierce, almost primal satisfaction. This was it. This was the vengeance I had craved. The carefully cultivated image, the very thing they valued above all else, was in tatters. The telephone rang. It was my mother, her voice thin and reedy, laced with a barely controlled hysteria I had never heard before. "Aurora, have you seen the news? Your father is being attacked? His reputation, his entire life's work. This is all so unfair. How could this be happening to us?" There was no concern for my emotional state, no apology for their past actions, just a desperate plea for me to magically fix their problems. The self-pity in her voice was nauseating. "What exactly do you expect me to do, Mother?" I asked. My voice calm, almost detached. It was a surreal moment, hearing my own voice so steady, so cold after years of silent suffering. You're a doctor, you're smart, you must know people, you have connections, you have to help your father clear his name. This is ruining us, she cried, her voice rising in pitch. Ethan is a wreck, he can't even leave the house after that horrible art article. Our family is being destroyed. Ruining you, I echoed, a sardonic smile touching my lips, though she couldn't see it. Destroyed, mother, you always taught me to be independent, to figure things out for myself. You said I was strong. You said I could handle anything. And after all, you're on a fixed income, aren't you? You couldn't possibly afford the kind of legal and PR assistance your father would need for something like this. I paused, letting my words hang in the air, a poisonous, sweet elixir. Perhaps you should just figure it out. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could almost hear the frantic gears turning in her mind, the realization slowly dawning that their strong daughter, their independent asset, was now entirely beyond their control. This was a new Aurora, one they had never anticipated, one they had inadvertently forged in the fires of their own deceit. Aurora, please, her voice was barely a whisper, now stripped of its usual veneer of authority. Family helps family. Did you really believe that, mother, when you hung up on me, when you refused to help me during my suspension, when you systematically stole my future to pay for Ethan's fake one? My voice was still calm, but beneath it thrummed a dangerous, exhilarating power. No, mother. Family doesn't always help family. Sometimes family becomes the problem, and sometimes the problem needs to be excised. I heard a choked sob, then the phone went dead. I had hung up on them. The moment was profoundly cathartic. The constant crushing weight of their expectations, their manipulation, their emotional neglect lifted. I still bore the scars of their betrayal, the deep wounds of a stolen childhood, but now there was space. Space for rage, yes, but also for something else, the burgeoning hope of building a life entirely on my own terms. The pain hadn't vanished, but the satisfaction of seeing their world burn a fire I had meticulously lit was a powerful antidote. The taste of victory was sweet, intoxicating, and for the first time in my life I felt truly unapologetically alive. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time it was my path. And I would walk it one defiant step at a time. The silence after I hung up on my mother was profound, heavier than any I had ever experienced. It wasn't just the absence of her voice. It was the shattering of decades of carefully maintained illusions. The last vestige of the dutiful daughter, the one who would always answer, always try to please, had finally evaporated. A chilling calm settled over me, a feeling of absolute unburdened freedom. The pain still resonated, a phantom limb of my former self, but it no longer held me captive. Instead, it fueled a cold, clear focus. I knew the impact of my actions. The financial blow, the public humiliation, these were wounds my parents Richard and Evelyn Vance valued above all else. Their world built on appearances and perceived success was now crumbling, but I needed to see it. I needed to witness the fallout, to confront the faces of my betrayers as their carefully constructed reality collapsed around them. A few days later, a mutual acquaintance, a distant cousin named Clara, who had always harbored a quiet disdain for my parents' heirs, called me. Her voice was a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. She said that our family's annual Thanksgiving dinner, a meticulously orchestrated affair meant to showcase the Vance family's enduring prestige, was still going to happen. Your mother is insisting on it, Aurora, Clara said. Something about maintaining appearances, about proving they're still strong. But honestly, it's going to be a disaster. Everyone is talking. About Ethan's art, about your father's dealings. It's a feeding frenzy. A perverse curiosity, a need for closure compelled me. I booked a flight to Boston, not with a heavy heart, but with a strange, almost clinical detachment. I wasn't going as their daughter seeking reconciliation. I was going as a witness to the unraveling, an observer to the final act of a long-running tragic play. The Chestnut Hill mansion, once a symbol of impenetrable grandeur, now seemed to loom under a permanent shadow when I arrived. The immaculate lawn had a few neglected patches, the usually vibrant fall foliage seemed duller, less inviting. I parked my rental car, a nondescript sedan, a stark contrast to the luxury vehicles usually lining the driveway, and took a deep breath. My heart hammered, but it was a warrior's beat, not a victim's. My mother, Evelyn, answered the door. The woman who stood before me was a ghost of her former self. Her usually perfectly coiffed blonde hair was slightly disheveled, revealing prominent gray roots. The sharp, assessing eyes I remembered were now bloodshot and sunken, framed by deep, dark circles. Her expensive silk dress hung loosely on her frame as if she had lost significant weight. Her posture, usually so regal, was slumped, defeated. Aurora, she whispered, her voice, barely audible, devoid of its usual cultivated warmth or even its recent hysterical edge. It was flat, lifeless, filled with a shock so profound it had rendered her almost inert. She looked at me not with anger but with a vacant, stunned incomprehension, as if seeing a phantom. You actually came." I said nothing, merely stepping past her into the grand foyer that once felt so intimidating. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the usual festive smells of roasted turkey and spiced cider conspicuously absent, replaced by a faint odor of stale grief. The house, usually bustling with caterers and socialites, was eerily quiet. Only a few distant relatives, mostly the more eccentric ones who either didn't follow the news or simply didn't care, were scattered awkwardly in the vast living room. My father Richard stood by the fireplace, usually his domain where he held court. He was holding a crystal glass, but it was empty. His normally robust frame was visibly shrunken, his shoulders hunched. His face, once so authoritative, was now a mask of ashen pallor etched with lines of worry and despair I had never seen. His impeccably tailored suit seemed to swallow him. He glanced at me, his eyes wide and unfocused, then quickly looked away as if my presence was too much to bear. The powerful, commanding patriarch was gone, replaced by a broken man. And then I saw Ethan. He was curled on a velvet armchair in the corner, almost invisible. His usually carefully styled hair was limp, his clothes rumpled. His eyes, normally carrying a superficial artistic angst, were now genuinely hollow, devoid of any light. He held a phone, but he wasn't looking at it. He was staring blankly at the wall, lost in his own private torment. The golden child, the fragile artist, had finally shattered under the weight of his own manufactured reality. He looked small, insignificant, utterly pathetic. My mother led me to an empty seat at the long dining table, which was sparsely set, a pale imitation of its usual lavish spread. We don't have caterers this year," she murmured, as if offering an explanation. "It was complicated. Your father is unwell." I sat surveying the scene. The shock on their faces was palpable. They hadn't just lost their money and their reputation. They had lost their very sense of self. Their identities were so intrinsically linked to their public image, their perceived success, that without it they were adrift, exposed. "Ethan is having a very difficult time," my mother said, her voice trembling slightly, the manipulative tone I remembered from childhood now entirely absent, replaced by a genuine, terrified concern for her son. The articles. The ridicule. He can't cope. He hasn't left the house in days." My father finally spoke, his voice raspy, barely above a whisper. "The market. Aurora. It's been brutal. Everything we had. Gone. And these accusations. They're trying to ruin me. My legacy. Everything I built." He looked at me then, his eyes pleading, searching for something, anything from the daughter he had dismissed. "You're a doctor, Aurora. You're smart. You must be able to help us. To explain. To fix this." The irony was breathtaking. They were still asking me to fix their problems even now, when I was the very architect of their downfall. But there was no anger in my response, only a cold, hard truth. "Explain what, father? That the house of cards you built on lies and stolen futures finally collapsed. That the legacy you cultivated was a hollow sham. That the fixed income was a cover for reckless gambling." My words hit them like physical blows. My mother gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. My father flinched, his pallor deepening. Ethan from his corner let out a soft guttural sound like a wounded animal. "The money you took from my inheritance, father, to fund Ethan's artistic endeavors," I continued, my voice steady, merciless. "The portion of my student loans you funneled into your family support fund while I worked 3 jobs to survive. The land deals, the blatant hypocrisy, the public relations charade you engineered for Ethan's so-called career. What is there to explain except the truth you refused to acknowledge for decades?" My mother's face crumpled. Tears, real, genuine tears, streamed down her cheeks, washing away the last vestiges of her composed facade. We never meant to hurt you, Aurora," she sobbed, the words choked and raw. We thought you were so strong, so independent. You didn't need us. Ethan, he was so fragile. He needed everything. He needed enablement, mother," I corrected, my voice unwavering. "He needed you to create a world where consequences didn't exist for him. And I, the strong one, needed the unconditional love and support you so freely, blindly lavished upon him at my expense." My father finally sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. I just wanted to maintain appearances, he mumbled, his voice muffled thick with despair. The family name. The legacy. After some unfortunate business decisions, I thought, if Aurora was a successful doctor and Ethan a recognized artist, we could keep up. For the family, and you sacrificed me for it, I stated, the words hanging heavy in the air. You sacrificed my dreams, my financial stability, my emotional well-being, all for a facade. You didn't just neglect me, you used me. You drained me, then cast me aside when I finally faltered, when I dared to be vulnerable. Ethan, who had been silent, slowly lifted his head. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw genuine remorse, not just self-pity reflected in their depths. Aurora, he said, his voice hoarse, I knew. Some of it. I knew the money was coming from somewhere. And I hated it. I hated myself for it. But I was so weak. So scared of them. I let them. I let them do it. I'm so sorry. His confession, a fragile thread of honesty in a tapestry of lies, was startling. It didn't absolve him, but it offered a glimpse of a damaged soul, perhaps another victim of the same manipulative architects, albeit one who benefited from their machinations. The revelation of their raw, unvarnished despair, the shattered pieces of their pride scattered around the opulent room, brought me a strange, disquieting sense of closure. The agony of my own suffering was acknowledged not by their understanding but by their utter collapse. They were broken. Their carefully constructed lives, their public personas were utterly destroyed. And in their ruin I found a sliver of peace. I stood up from the table. I didn't come here to reconcile, I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. I came here to understand. And now I do. You made your choices. I am making mine. My mother looked up, her eyes wide, desperate. Aurora, where will we go? What will we do? We have nothing left. You taught me to be independent, didn't you, Mother? I replied, a ghost of a bitter smile on my lips. You always said I could figure it out. Perhaps it's time you learned that lesson yourselves. Or perhaps you can rely on the delicate constitution of your son to pull you through. After all, you invested so much in his artistic future, didn't you? I turned and walked towards the door, leaving them in the ruins of their grand deception. As I stepped out of the mansion and into the cool Boston air, a profound sense of lightness enveloped me. The air felt cleaner, the sky brighter. The shackles of expectation of needing their approval had fallen away. They were experiencing the ultimate consequence of their actions, a fate far more devastating than any prison sentence, the loss of everything they valued brought about by the very daughter they had scorned. And the profound satisfaction of that realization was a powerful balm healing the deepest wounds of my heart, allowing a fragile seed of genuine self-worth to finally take root. The retribution was complete. My rebirth had begun. The cool Boston air had never felt so liberating. Each step I took away from the Vance mansion, each footfall on the crunching autumn leaves felt like the shedding of a skin, a monumental weight lifting from my soul. The silence of the night, no longer punctuated by my mother's desperate pleas or my father's hollow pronouncements, was a canvas for a new kind of peace. The bitter satisfaction of seeing their lives crumble was potent, yet beneath it a vast emptiness began to surface. Revenge, it turned out, was not a panacea for a lifetime of pain. It was a demolition, and now I had to rebuild. I drove west without a clear destination, but with a profound sense of purpose. The sterile city of New York, with its echoes of my forced medical career, felt suffocating. I needed to be somewhere vast, elemental, where the horizon stretched endlessly, mirroring the infinite possibilities of a life finally truly my own. My meager savings, supplemented by the unexpectedly lower student loan payments, allowed me a small measure of freedom. I chose a small coastal town in Northern California, a place where the ocean roared and the redwood forests whispered, far removed from the manicured lawns of Chestnut Hill and the concrete canyons of Manhattan. My new home was a tiny rustic cottage nestled among the trees with a sliver of ocean view. It was a stark contrast to the opulence I had left behind, and I embraced its simplicity. The first few weeks were a blur of raw emotion. The adrenaline of the confrontation had worn off, leaving me vulnerable. I grieved not just for the lost dreams, but for the childhood that never was for the parents who chose illusion over their own child. I spent days staring at the churning Pacific, letting the vastness of it wash over me, trying to absorb its indifference, its relentless rhythm of destruction and creation. My old canvases, those dark, angry landscapes I had painted in secret, still haunted me. I brought them out, setting them up in the small, sunlit living room that now served as my studio. They were a testament to my suffering, but also to my resilience. They were the chronicles of Aurora, the silenced artist. One afternoon, while browsing a local art gallery, a small, unassuming space filled with vibrant, unpretentious local art, I met Clara. She was an older woman with kind, discerning eyes and hands stained with paint, the scent of turpentine clinging to her sweater. She was a retired art professor from Berkeley, now living out her days quietly painting seascapes. We struck up a conversation about a particular piece, and soon I found myself pouring out fragments of my story, not the whole truth, but enough for her keen artistic intuition to grasp the depth of my pain. Clara didn't offer pity. She offered understanding. She looked at me, really looked at me with the eyes of someone who recognized the dormant fire within. "Your art, my dear," she said, her voice soft but firm, "is not just a hobby. It's a language, and you have a story that demands to be told. Don't let anyone silence you again." She invited me to paint with her, not as a student, but as a peer. In her sun-drenched studio overlooking the crashing waves, I began to paint again. The first strokes were hesitant, still tinged with anger and resentment. But Clara gently guided me, not by dictating technique, but by encouraging me to feel, to embrace the messy, chaotic beauty of emotion. "Paint the betrayal, Aurora," she said one day, watching me struggle with a particularly dark canvas. "Paint the rage, paint the emptiness. But then paint the light that shines through the cracks. Paint your light." It was a slow, arduous process of healing. I painted the memory of my parents' dismissive waves, the sting of their words, the hollow ache of abandonment. I painted Ethan's pale, self-indulgent face, the false glow of his artistic success. But then slowly, new colors began to emerge. Colors of the vibrant California poppies, the deep blues of the ocean, the rich greens of the redwoods. I painted myself not as the wounded doctor, but as a figure emerging from the shadows, bathed in a tentative, hopeful light. My art became my therapy, my voice, my path to reclaiming myself one brushstroke at a time. Meanwhile, back in Boston, the world I had dismantled continued to crumble. I heard snippets of news through Clara, who still had connections in the East Coast art world and a knack for gossip. The Vance mansion, my childhood home, had been foreclosed upon. My parents unable to maintain their payments after my father's reputation was destroyed, and his investments evaporated, had lost everything. They had moved into a small rented apartment, a stark, humiliating contrast to their former grandeur. Clara reported that Evelyn, once the epitome of Boston elegance, was now seen shopping at discount stores, her face drawn and haggard, her spirit utterly broken. Richard, stripped of his boards and associations, spent his days alone, a shadow of his former authoritative self, utterly isolated. The silence of their social ostracism was far more devastating than any public outcry. And Ethan, his story was perhaps the most poignant. The exposé on his art had not just ruined his career, it had shattered his carefully constructed identity. He had fallen into a deep depression, unable to cope with the public humiliation. My mother had told Clara that he barely left his room, living off takeout and the last remnants of his parents' dwindling finances. He was no longer the pampered, protected artist. He was simply a lost, frightened man, stripped of the illusion that had defined him. But then a surprising piece of news emerged. Clara told me that Ethan, in a desperate attempt to find a new path, had started volunteering at a community art center for underprivileged children. He wasn't painting himself, he was teaching. My mother, in one of her rare, emotionally drained calls to Clara, had confessed that he seemed to find a strange sense of purpose there, a quiet redemption in helping others create without the pressure of his own talent. One day, several months after I had left Boston, I received a package. It was from Ethan. Inside was a small, crudely carved wooden bird, unvarnished, simple yet surprisingly delicate. And a letter written in a shaky hand. He said he didn't expect me to forgive him. He said he knew he had been weak, selfish, and complicit in our parents' deception. He described the suffocating weight of their expectations, the constant pressure to be an artist even when he knew his work was hollow. He confessed that he had always admired my talent, my strength, even as he resented it because it highlighted his own perceived inadequacies. He wrote about the shame he felt every time he accepted money that he knew deep down should have been mine. He said the humiliation of the public exposé had been excruciating, but in a strange way it had freed him. It had forced him to confront the lie he was living, the person he had pretended to be. He said he was finding a different kind of fulfillment now, a quieter one, away from the spotlight, simply helping children discover the joy of creation. He ended the letter by saying he hoped one day I could find peace. He wished me well truly for the first time. Reading his letter, I felt a complex swirl of emotions. There was no anger left, no desire for further retribution. Just a quiet sadness for the lost years, for the two siblings who had been pitted against each other by their parents' warped ambitions. Ethan's confession, his genuine remorse, wasn't an absolution, but it was a recognition. It showed me that he too had been a victim of their manipulation, albeit one who had benefited from it. He was not entirely innocent, but he was also not the monstrous, unfeeling rival I had once perceived. The pain of betrayal of a stolen life would always be a part of my story. But it no longer defined me. Through my art, through my chosen community, through the wild, untamed beauty of my new home, I was finding my voice, my purpose, my authentic self. I exhibited my new works in local galleries under a different name, not for fame or fortune, but for the sheer joy of creating, of connecting, of finally being seen for who I truly was. My paintings were no longer solely about anger. They were about resilience, about healing, about the fierce, defiant beauty of self-discovery. One of my most cherished pieces was a large canvas depicting a woman faceless but strong, emerging from a storm-tossed sea, her arms outstretched towards a brilliant, hopeful sunrise. It was me. It was my journey. It was the moment I stopped waiting for someone else to paint my world and picked up the brush myself. The lessons were etched deep into my soul. True parental love, I had learned, was not about shaping a child to fit one's own desires or to prop up one's own fragile ego. It was about acceptance, about nurturing the unique spark within each child, about providing a safe space for them to become who they were meant to be, not who they were forced to be. It was about seeing, truly seeing their individual struggles and triumphs, not just their reflection of your own. And for myself, the most profound lesson was that self-worth could not be outsourced. It could not be earned through others' approval or through the endless pursuit of external validation. It had to be cultivated from within, painstakingly, authentically. The hardest forgiveness was not for my parents, but for the younger Aurora, for having believed their lies for so long, for having sacrificed so much of herself in a futile quest for love that was never freely given. I forgave her, and in doing so, I freed myself. My life wasn't a fairy tale ending free of scars or shadows. There was a quiet melancholy that lingered, a reminder of the path I had not walked. But there was also a profound sense of peace, a deep abiding joy in the simple act of living authentically. I was no longer a doctor nor a manufactured artist. I was simply Aurora. An artist, yes, but more importantly, a woman who had found her own truth, painted her own story, and finally truly came home to herself. The canvas of my life was still being painted, but this time every stroke was deliberate, every color chosen by me for me, and it was finally a masterpiece of my own making.